I'm Pam Comas, recently retired after 40 years in the classroom. Yes. Now quilter. I don't know what other descriptor you want.
No, you're a new appointee, you might.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I am currently a board member of the National Speech and Debate Association, housed in Griffith, Wisconsin. And this past summer, when we had our leadership conference in Vegas, and I would encourage all of you to go. Chris has been there before. It's fun. It's probably one of the best 4 days of collaborating with people from all over the United States on speech, debate, theater activities. And one of the sessions that I was asked to do was looking at resources, why, how, and what. How many of you have heard of the term the golden circle? Anybody? Okay, well, first thing I'm going to do is tell you a book, and only because I'm old, I forget these things, that you need to buy. And I will tell you the training I was in, which was out of my element. If I can spell correctly. It's Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. How Great Leaders Inspire Action is the title of the book. How Great Leaders Inspire Action. Have you read the book?
I know, but I show his TED Talks.
The first thing you need to do is go to his TED Talk, which is absolutely excellent. And let me tell you the environment I was in. Many of you who know me know that I have a second job, which is admitting people through the emergency room at St. Francis Hospital in Topeka. And St. Francis is part of a larger organization, the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth. We go into Colorado, lots of different states. Every hospital in this organization has developed what we call the caring model, which was a 4-hour training that every employee, including housekeeping, nurses, all of the directors, anybody who worked in the hospital had to go through the 4-hour training. One segment of the training dealt with the golden circle, which is Simon Sinek's big thing of changing our critical thinking process. He talks about in this book that he has written, and this book is, I think, maybe 2009 when it was published. He talks in the book about how we as leaders, movers and shakers in our classroom, members of various boards, entrepreneurs, how we have not always been as successful as we could be because we start with the what. What are we doing? How are we going to do it? And then we lastly ask the question, why? Well, that's backwards. We should always be asking ourselves, why are we doing something? Why are we doing a flipped classroom? I mean, many of you just came from Josh's session. Or why are we doing X? He applies this to great people like Steve Jobs, Walt Disney, Bill Gates, for an example. Why are these individuals successful? It's because they started with the why. We know, for an example, that there are many manufacturers of computers. Apple isn't the only game in town, right? Many of us are Mac users. Many of us have iPads. Many of us have iPhones. But there's Dell, who produces computers. There's Hewlett-Packard that makes computers. So why is Apple more successful than any of those other computer companies? Part of what SNAP talks about is that company has always started with the why in terms of why are we doing something. Same thing with Disney. Why did we buy all this swampland, and it was swampland in Florida, at a very low price and create Disney World? Why did we do that? Why did we leave California and move to the opposite end? So we as leaders in our field should be always starting with the why as our inner circle there, as the first question we ask ourselves when we're doing anything in the classroom. And then we need to talk about the how. How are we going to do this? And finally, it's the what. What is it that we will do? So his whole idea of reshaping critical thinking is important in terms of what we do, which is what has brought me and several of us who've been part of a small committee that we want to invite others to be a part of this input of looking at why NSDA should be building resources for all teachers, whether you are an NSDA member or not, across the United States in speech, listening, arguing, theater. Chris has done a profound project that started with linking the results of ACT test scores to debaters. Do you want to speak to that for just a second, Chris, before we...
Well, it started as a challenge in our building, which was every department in our building was, we got all of the ACT questions and the type of questions they are. And our principal said, everybody go back to your departments and what do you teach in your classroom that helps with this question? And I'm in department of one, but as I started looking through it, I could think of a million things that speech and debate actually help them in all of those. And so I just mapped them all out. And then I handed over those maps to NSDA and they're on the website there. And eventually my idea was that that would be a big grid that would have hot links to different lesson plans that we do through those things, where anyone could pull them up and say, okay, our students are having trouble with this concept that they're being tested on in the ACT. What does speech and debate do to make that concept clearer and better? And how can we do that? And then we also extended it too at the time to Common Core standards as well. And so all the Common Core standards are moved that way too.
Melanie and I just had a profound conversation before Josh ever began his presentation this morning. We were talking about resources for the state of Kansas and working through the State Department of Education with Susie Ortle, who happens to be the language arts person. Some of you know who Susie is because you've been involved in workshops with her. One thing that's very interesting was the comment that Josh made to Melanie and myself. We should be the movers and shakers, not only in the state of Kansas, speech, debate, theater people, in terms of the Common Core. And the pure language arts English teacher should be focusing on literature and maybe writing. But we should be doing that whole critical thinking piece, that whole piece about argumentation, the whole piece about speaking and listening. Interesting comment, I thought. So keep that in mind as we're working through some things that we're going to talk about today. Okay, Renee Motter, who is a colleague of mine, and she is someone who teaches AP language at Air Academy in Colorado Springs. She's also the debate and forensics coach out there. She and I presented at the National Council of Teachers of English last November on the topic, how to listen, how to speak, how to argue. And we wrote 4 proposals for this year, which the topic was the story. 3 of our 4 proposals got accepted. And we will be representing NSDA in Washington, D.C. this year, presenting, telling a story through argument. And I'll give you some previews about that at the end of this session of the kinds of things that we are developing for that presentation. I hope that all of you are sitting with tables with a colleague. If not, move to a table with a colleague. And I'd like one person at each table for the next 3 to 5 minutes to be your scribe and talk about reasons for why is building resources vital to the viability of our organization. That could be KSCA, that could be NSDA. We as coaches in general, whether we are a member of the organization, any organization, why do we need to have speech, debate, theater resources? Why is that important? So, time starts now. Let's say at 10 till 11, we're going to share out at each table. So if you've got a scribe, that would be great.
What you say, I don't mind here.
There's some books about it.
Right. They're more likely to stay with it.
Which sometimes we get, because there is only
We'll create a niche for ourselves.
But I mean, if I did, we don't
Share, you know, it's always been a presentation, share.
Talk about it.
yes, speech teachers.
Oh, you're one charts teaching. I know that I'm doing one charts.
Yeah.
All of those.
When you have a stand,
I'm just,
that's it. What I do, so it's
sidebar.
we have a big, graphic, but it's hugely diverse. Urban, suburban, right here we've got.
You have stage one. I just give you three. All right.
If you don't make, I mean, you don't adapt, try to respond. We'll kind of have such a posture, more than it ever did before. I felt pretty old upstairs about an hour. Yeah. Right, right. But the names of the
The
different.
names of the other things.
Red Devil, I'm still Red Devil. Just remember that little boy.
My wife's frustration, she's not good at technology, but she's also very phobic about it as well. She teaches junior high social studies. But in her mind, it takes material.
Yeah, I would say, like, why you don't follow.
She just have a lot of things in her head, but she feels like she's not doing her students justice because she doesn't have newfangled things. She doesn't get involved in technology, so it frustrates her. And I think if we don't have viable, if we have people that are good at these things, that help with those pieces.
They're going to be
Well,
dead.
but both ends need to share, people with great information and people with great technology and solutions to be able to communicate and put the product together and everybody can share. Sure.
I mean, that's what we We've got a couple more minutes and then we'll start sharing out.
That's the stuff they see find.
Yeah. You gotta steer on towards.
He's right. He was good stuff together. That job take a stab at it. Not content wise, it's sites, but. Right. That's the stuff that I've figured out, it changes every year.
Yeah, we all started. Good, he's the official scribe. Because he's got work done too.
You were saying earlier, you were saying that we could combine this to the building and platform stuff.
I would think I would add to Josh.
That is what you're talking about.
You just can't sit in front of one.
You know, people have the relevant issues, and I think some people feel like, oh, well, here's these features, that would be great. It's, you know, now you're teaching. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, it's that time. We're going to share out. So we're going to start over here with this table. Share out some of the things that your table discussed as to why we need to have building resources as vital to the viability of our organization. Jamel, you were the scribe.
Yes, ma'am. Well, as far as mentoring new coaches, it's an opportunity for those resources to be available to their first new coaches. It will also help administrations understand exactly what we're doing and why it's important. Also provide smaller schools, which you had a great point, with some extra resources, especially if you have someone who's an English teacher who is not necessarily going into education to become a fake forensics or theater person, and now they've been given that job. These resources can help assist that program for smaller schools. Also, we can kind of be on the same page as a state. And Chris mentioned, you know, a state our size with different diverse populations, different situations. And she talked about Garden City and how he has to travel, you know, 7 hours to get to a tournament. These resources, these individuals, or whatever kind of resources we're all referring to, will help as a state, where we can all have the same access to these resources. And then also, some school districts, including our own, is cutting funding for programs, and there's not a grant out there that people are aware of to help a school that's struggling, or a school that wants to have a program, and there's that funding, so resources can help in that situation. And then also just to be an advocate for what we do and what we love, and how important it is to support each other and help build our activity.
Awesome. Thank you. Save those notes. All right, this table, share out with us.
All right, well, we discussed how it's important to follow the development of new technologies, where social media is going, paperless debate, file sharing. A lot of that, especially like file sharing in debate, student to students, they're sharing their evidence with each other. Coach to students, you can share instruction, and coach to coach, as they were saying to mirror what they said about mentoring new coaches and getting that information passed on. We talked about keeping up with other fields that are competing for our attention. That it would help, these help increase our visibility. We can gain support from other programs within the building saying, hey, look how you could utilize this as well. Get them on our side versus going head to head in competition. It helps us emphasize quality versus quantity. Let's just get all these kids college credit to check mark off versus let's get them to learn something. And highlights the importance of speaking skills in a society that still doesn't necessarily understand its value.
Okay. This table.
We talked also a little bit about that concept of increasing the presence of speech in the academic world and professional collaboration is a big deal everywhere else, and sometimes it's minimalized for like 1 to 10 people or small programs, and then lessening kind of the individual workload at times by sharing maybe not being material always, and then again support for new teachers and coaches coming up around a lot, and just that there are very few resources when you start looking around for something to supplement what you're doing. There's not much that's out there.
Well, just a couple of additional things. One, we always spend a lot of time indicating that it really helps the younger teachers coming in. But, I'm in my 31st year of teaching, and I can tell you that the last 5 years, more things have happened that have changed my classroom than in the first 25. And so when the new people come in, what they forget is that they teach us so much more that we have to be receptive to. And it kind of allows us to have to open up and let them know that you really can teach us probably that we can teach you, because right now I'm like, where's the on switch? But we all have to go, oh yes, well I knew where that was.
Yes.
Second thing is, because our discipline is so different, we're also used to being in isolation in our classrooms, because typically I'm in a fairly large high school, and I'm still the only speech teacher. But we also are in that weird competitive edge, so, we don't have a lot of trust in one another because we compete against you every weekend and you're out to get me and all that kind of business. And I think sometimes what we forget is that if we could be more trusting of one another, we actually become better competitors if we share rather than when we hide. You've always said it best, in that situation. So it's one of those where we really have to start reaching out a little bit more, or we're going to find out that we just collapse, because we will just collapse on ourselves.
Good point. Steve?
Yeah, we kind of dovetail into several things people have mentioned already. I think a lot of times we feel like we're competing for the attention of students and others based on like media that's out there and things that are on the internet and other social media. And if we could turn that around so that we're not in competition, but we're utilizing those things, those avenues to reach more people, and then realize that we have something to offer that's vital as well. We may not have all of the electronic sophistication that's going on. It's the hot button to push, but we got to teach people to communicate with one another and not just use their phones. That's pretty important. We know that there's a lot of folks out there that have great information in their heads. Teachers that have been around for a long, long time. My wife would be an example where she just knows so much, but she's technologically held back by fear, anxiety, and so being able to have resources that allow her to do what she does in a new way, and then also frees her up to share that knowledge with other people that maybe already have the technology savvy, but their content maybe is a little bit lacking, is fairly important. And then, let's see, I think that's about all we've got, yeah. If we don't adapt, I mean, organizations that we're reliant on are going to become archaic pretty fast. I mean,
They're going to die.
yeah, they're gonna die off. So I think we really need to stand strong in those areas.
I think one of the big words that all of us need to embrace is collaboration. Now, collaboration has an ugly face oftentimes when it is forced collaboration, and our district is in a forced collaboration. But collaboration in its truest form, of where you are collaborating with people of like minds and sharing out of ideas, is invigorating. It's exciting. And like you said, Steve, and several of you also iterated, is if we don't do this, we're going to become stagnant, we're going to fade away, and we're not going to be powerful. And we know how powerful having a speech communication background really is to all of our students and to ourselves. Some of the things that we brainstormed prior to having the convention, this would be Renee and myself as we were setting this up. We all know the push for critical thinking and effective communication in terms of you being successful. We're talking about it in the Common Core. We know that the Common Core has had a lot of negative buzz to it politically. I won't go there. We know that 46 states out of the 50 have adopted the Common Core, and we know that it's here to stay because, we hope, unless we have legislators who say it needs to totally go away. We know for a fact from business leaders that incoming employees lack many of the skills that we teach in speech, debate, and theater. Tony Wagner says it best in his book Global Achievement Gap, and then he follows it up in a book that was just put out several years ago, Innovating Innovators. He's a professor in the education department at Harvard University, and he's part of the Change Institute. He's also the one who did the video on why Finland is more successful in terms of teacher preparation and educating children than the United States. So he's got, and by the way, he's an old English teacher and a former high school principal before he went back and became a faculty member at Harvard. He talks about, in Global Achievement Gap, if we do not provide the 7 survival skills for kids, and those 7 survival skills, which you can look up on the internet, is everything that we teach as speech educators. Effective oral and written communication. Duh. Yes, sir.
So I have a question for you. So as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should be making more of an argument for the fact that we have no communication class in our high schools. But I'm afraid that if I go to my principal and my school board, my superintendent, and say this, say these things that you're saying, cite this Tony Wagner and all of these things, that they'll say, well, because Common Core is there, we don't need you. Because Common Core requires all of these teachers to teach what it is you teach. So how do I avoid, how do I press this issue that I need to be there, that these resources, how do I press the issue
Well,
without them saying that?
I'm going to open that up for discussion.
one of the things that we talked, because that's exactly part of the conversations we've had at our PDs, when they start saying, oh, well, we're going to be doing all of this. Some of it has also to do with, like, my speech course is starting to morph a little bit as I also look at some of the mandatory speaking assignments now that they have to do in some of these classes, or, sorry, some of them are kind of lame, but that's okay, it's like, state your name, great, I also tell them, guess what? When I'm teaching logic and I'm teaching, critical thinking and I'm teaching problem solving, I do that in my class, why do we need to teach calculus? You know, you try to have to think one step ahead of them, because in those situations, when kids ask, why do I have to take this math class, because they're always like, oh my God, can I do everything? I said, it's to make you a better problem solver, which is exactly what we're gonna teach you here. It's not because you need to know these magical numbers or what the formulas are, because you're never gonna use them again. It's how to problem solve and how to effectively problem solve in that situation. So my class is gonna start taking a little bit of turn with some of the career readiness information in terms of not only the public speaking aspect of it, but now also the more the organizational communication aspect of it, which a lot of the career readiness stuff is just, nobody's gonna be teaching that.
Right.
I mean, nobody.
Chris?
I was gonna say, a couple things. One